Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of React Roundup. I am your host today, TJ Van Tol, and with me today on our panel, I have Jack Harrington.
Hello.
And Paige Niedringhaus.
Hey everyone.
And our special guest today is Chris Frewin. Chris, how's it going? Welcome to React Roundup.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey folks, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been working on actually building out Top End Devs. If you're interested, you can go to topenddevs.com/podcast, and you can actually hear a little bit more about my story, about why I'm doing what I'm doing with Top End Devs, why I changed it from devchat.tv to Top End Devs. But what I really want to get into is that I have decided that I'm going to build the platform that I always wished I had with devchat.tv, and I renamed it to Top End Devs because I want to give you the resources that are going to help you to build the career that you want, right? So whether you want to be an influencer in tech, whether you want to go and just max out your salary and then go live a lifestyle with your family, your friends, or just traveling the world or whatever, I want to give you the resources that are going to help you do that. We're going to have career and leadership resources in there, and we're going to be giving you content on a regular basis to help you level up and max out your career. So go check it out at topenddevs.com. If you sign up before my birthday, that's December 14th. If you sign up before my birthday, you can get 50% off the lifetime of your subscription. Once again, that's topenddevs.com.
Yeah, so Chris, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, why you're famous, all that good sort of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, famous might be questionable. Yeah, so I'm currently a full stack software engineer at a startup called InClub, and it's based around Zurich, Switzerland. And we're trying to be, if you could imagine, kind of an Airbnb, but for experiences. So I'm going hiking this weekend. Who wants to come with me? Or, going on a pub crawl. Who wants to come with me? And so, yeah, I've been there now just over a year. Yeah, from everything from back end, mobile app, CMS, everything in between. So I've seen a little bit of everything.
Awesome.
Nice.
So I know we reached out because you've written a couple of really interesting articles about your thoughts, like on all sorts of things, from like code structure to testing to how BDD, like behavior-driven development. So maybe do you want to start by just giving like an overview of some of, like, maybe we could start with like BDD and like how you came to like how you structure code and how you approach problems at the startup, because not a whole lot of us get the chance to really like greenfield build something like that at scale. So I'm curious, like some of your thoughts and opinions you have to share around that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. So the challenge for us was that we were a very small team. So up until a few weeks ago, I was kind of the only developer. So it was me and the two co-founders. So as you said, yeah, super greenfield. And we were guided. One of our technical advisors told us about this kind of behavior driven development thing. So we're like, okay, well, what is this? And so he pointed us, I guess, at the very top of this whole like behavior driven development and test driven development stuff is this language called Gherkin. And so Gherkin is simply, you could consider it like a programming language, but it's also kind of, behavior and kind of product design language. So basically the three important keywords are given, when, and then. And for us developers, that kind of corresponds one-to-one to the act, arrange, assert trio. So the reason he pointed us in this direction is that the two co-founders, they're kind of the minds behind the product and driving a lot of the ideas behind the product. They can describe in plain English or with these three sentences, right? Given I open the app, when I press the login button, then I see the login screen, right? Something like that. They can explain steps in very plain English. And then I guess it's we now. There's two of us now. That's awesome. We can write the tests against these kind of, we call them Gherkin specifications.
Mm-hmm.
So. Very cool. And it's spelled, just for anybody else curious, Gherkin, just for anybody just casually Googling this as we go across, because I would not have guessed that's spelling at all.
Yeah, I believe.
Does this integrate with Jest, or how do I, if I just want to start with this, where do I start with this?
Yeah, so there's two ways. The one way is you can use a library called Cucumber, which they have actually drivers for a lot of languages. I think also plain Java, JavaScript, Kotlin, other languages. So you can use that, and you basically directly import like a function called given, and then you pass the string of whatever the given line of that description file is. But yeah, we have since integrated with Jest. There's an integration. You basically, so when you write these specification files, we're using the .feature file extension. That seems to be like kind of a standard. And this Jest integration works that you import. They have it's called like a load feature function. And then Jest knows, okay, I'm reading from this feature file. And then you have define feature with more in, I guess, a standard Jest way. But still with these, you get these little given when then functions that you can call from Jest in the order of the steps.
Oh, nice.
So.
Yeah, I found it's Jest dash cucumber on GitHub, and you're right. It looks to me like any other Jest. All these nouns, it's kind of sometimes you take a step back and go like, these sentences I'm saying are a little crazy, but it looks like any other Jest test that I've seen before. But you're right, it clearly has the given when then type of structure, just sort of embedded within it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting that you've been able to incorporate that into a testing framework, because at the last company that I worked with, our product managers were responsible for writing a lot of our feature stories, and they would use that sort of syntax to write out the story. So exactly like you would say, given a user clicks on a button, given a user is on our application, when they click on the input button, then I should open up the input or the login screen. But we would then translate that into our own tests, where it would be like test or it should XYZ. So that's really cool that you can just take it directly from the user's story or the user input and make that part of the test. Because it's like, if you don't meet that criteria exactly, there's something wrong with the code, not the or how it was defined maybe. But that's really cool that you could have that one-to-one comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's huge advantages. I mean, what you just described is amazing, right? Like basically the product development team or the product management team can kind of have a one-to-one bridge right to the engineers. And what we also found, now that we have this new developer on, you basically have your whole infrastructure more or less. You can say, hey, or if they're asking about what does this feature do or how does it work, you say, hey, don't read the test, read the test second, but first read these feature files. And then you can understand, okay, I see exactly these user stories in plain English. So that's super valuable. So
you keep around the plain English versions of these requirements then? So it's not just the tests that live on?
Yeah. These are checked right into the code base.
Okay.
So with that said, what Paige was mentioning, sometimes we can write the test directly as they're written, but sometimes, I mean, it's been a constant learning process for both of us. I mean, for example, we had features where it was you have a form and it's if the email's wrong, I see an email error. If the first name's wrong, I see a first name error. But I've learned okay, that should probably just be in a unit test for the form validation function, right? That doesn't probably need to be always you probably don't need to write every test in this given when then syntax. It's kind of like a pick and choose, and it's a constant it's a discussion between us and the product team.
So would this be more of a replacement for EDE tests then? I mean, I wouldn't imagine necessarily writing unit tests this way. I guess you could more.
Yeah, you're right. That's where we found it's the easiest, right? Because end-to-end tests are much higher level anyway, which works much better with I press this button.
When I go to the home page, I find that my name says blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never used this structure for actually implementing tests before, but I have used this when working with product people before. And the other kind of nice thing I think about this format is it forces product people to give more specific requirements for things as well, because I'm sure a lot of you can resonate with, sometimes you'll get these requirements that are vague, or they have or they're complicated. Yeah, or they don't. Yeah, exactly. They don't consider things beyond, and like this sort of forces you to say, like, okay, well, when this happens, or this scenario, when this happens, what should happen, right? What happens with these account types? What happens if they try to log in and they already have an account, or it's an invalid email, or the server is down, or whatever, right? So it gives you like a clear just means of specifying requirements.
Yeah, and then even better, like when you do get that feedback, then you still have these descriptions and these scenarios for those the unhappy path, or when the server's down. Given the server's down, what happens? So
yeah, I think I used this at a previous job, and I remember there being like part of it was on us to actually go and build out like the regular expressions, like enable the terminology, like when I do X, I see blah, and like you kind of like were writing regular expressions to match some of the English terminology of the test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you find yourself doing that a lot, or is that not so much?
What do you mean exactly? Or
well, like there were expression matchers for the terminology in the test, like because the terminology is written in kind of an plain English speaking style, right? When I go to the page, right? I ended up actually having to write like pattern matchers for some of that stuff.
Yeah, it depends. I guess I'm not sure what you mean exactly. So
that's okay.
Do you mean like because the given, or you mean the body of the test itself? Like what? Yeah. So yeah, that's we typically have done what we've been using a lot, especially in these end-to-end tests, is just like a test ID. If you're aware with those. So yeah, the whole thing behind test IDs is it's considered sometimes anti-pattern, I guess. But what we realized is because the whole kind of startup environment, features could change like 2 weeks from now with different UI elements, different texts and everything like that. So some of the other matchers like get by text or get by element, they don't make so much sense, at least from our opinion. So when you have this test ID, it's difficult. I mean, sometimes the test ID itself kind of gives way to what it is, like a button, or at least like a touchable. We're working in React Native, so a touchable opacity. Yeah.
So one question I have, you said you store a lot of these requirements actually in the code base. So how do you handle like the location of those, especially for things? Because occasionally you'll have requirements that aren't specific to, say, like a page, right? Like they'll have to be like, I do something on one page and then I go back to another and something should happen, sort of thing. So do you have like app level requirements, or like how sort of pedantic do you get about that, and how do you sort of handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's something we're still working on. So far, we've had like a set. Usually you have like 5 or 6 of these feature files per feature. But then we've also, like the engineering team we've kind of designed our own feature files still to this, which I could hear a lot of people out there would be like, what? That's a waste of time. But it's still going back to this idea that you have a catalog of everything that you're testing, in a catalog of these features. So typically, for example, like these end-to-end tests, we've written ourselves in the Gherkin syntax, which has these kind of cross, multi-page stories and things like that. Yeah, it's difficult to balance that. Like how should I explain? Because you can't ask like the product team, they can't write a feature file probably for a specific function in your code base, right? They don't know about it. So it's really, it just comes down to reading the features and saying, okay, where is this going to go? More often than not, it's probably going to go into an integration test or end-to-end test. But even then, you may even want to break down or talk with them, say, yeah, okay, let's take these scenarios and put them in a different test, or that actually belongs with a different feature or grouped with other features. So yeah, it's quite challenging, actually. I'm not sure that's probably a horrible or no good answer there, but
no, because I think everybody struggles. Yeah, well, everybody struggles with this, right? Like, I think this is just a common thread of software development. No matter what system you use, like where you put tests and how you organize requirements and how you maintain them over time is a constant struggle. So if anybody had the magic bullet answer, we'd all be just doing that.
Yeah,
So,
one
Chris,
thing I can say to that at least is that we have like for our end-to-end tests, which are supposed to be like the least, the top of the pyramid, least used and whatnot. What we do have there is like only we call them like business critical stories, right? So like, can a user check out? Can they do this other like typically like, so we have at InClub, you can like create your own experience, of course, like you can put in the title, description. These things we have as end-to-end tests because they're the most important. But in terms of unit tests and integration tests, well, currently we're a bit more lax with those. Of course, you should have all your tests passing before you go to production. But just in terms of the way they're designed, a lot more of them are just written by us, the software team, and there's maybe not a feature file yet for those. So.
Hey, folks, I'm here with JD from Raygun. JD, we were talking just a second ago about empathy, and it seems like a common concept within the programming community. And yet, when we're building features for customers, a lot of times we call it done when it passes CI, deploys, and doesn't give us errors. And that really doesn't seem very empathetic when it comes to our customers because we're not looking at what they're doing. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, until your code actually hits the customer, you don't really know if it's any good. Everybody uses things in so many different weird and wonderful ways. You can only really debug in production.
I've been there. It's done.
Here.
It's not done. Oh, crap. It's not done. I got to go fix it. Now it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we see things like error reports flowing into Raygun,
right.
A lot of the time it's things where you just kind of go, oh, that was a configuration that as a developer, I didn't think could exist, but actually here's an example. And so it's connecting that code to customer and your development team through to real users and their experiences, which to your point, builds real empathy, and the best software teams care a lot about how their customers are experiencing their software.
Right. It's kind of the feedback from the app, but it's also kind of this meta feedback. As we do better, we tend to get less of this negative input back from our customer, which really does reflect empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think to your point earlier about CI/CD pipelines, like we've done an amazing amount of work as an industry to automate getting to prod really fast. But if you really want to go super fast, you need to close that loop with real-time feedback from prod back to the dev team. And that allows them to do things like fail forward and just really leverage that investment in CI/CD, and it can turn into a real superpower.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to encourage you folks, set up your CI/CD, but then go sign up for Raygun. They'll actually give you a free trial, and you can get it at raygun.com.
So that actually leads into my next question, and you touched on this a little bit with the testing pyramid, but how many integration and unit tests would you say you have compared to your end-to-end tests? What's your percentage?
Yeah, so we're kind of weird. The middle of our pyramid is very fat, so the integration level. And I think that comes a lot from like React itself. You can argue maybe a small component is like a unit test, but probably in reality, you're gonna need some component from somewhere else to test your components. And that's the biggest part of our code base. I mean, we have the unit tests we do have are we have only, I don't know, a dozen or so. And those are for our most critical functions. Ideally, I mean, yeah, everybody wants the ideal world where you have 100% test coverage, every function, every component. Well, okay, maybe we don't as software developers, maybe we don't because we'll go crazy. But yeah, so we have, I would say, maybe like 15% unit and end to end. So on the two ends, and then the rest is all integration. Yeah, that's just what we have currently.
No, I think that makes sense. I'm also we've had conversations before. We're not on team 100% unit testing coverage here
No.
on this show. We're very much
definitely not.
pragmatic. And I think it's even beyond pragmatic, because if you have a goal of 100% test coverage, that puts in sort of weird incentives as well. Like you end up just writing tests just to do it versus whether it's actually providing value to you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get these meaningless tests, and if they break, you're not quite sure why. What are you testing? What was the intent here, and all that?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm happy to riff on this. I was going to ask a CI/CD question, but we'll get there.
I was just going to add one final thought that, I mean, your unit tests are code too. You have to maintain it. Your requirements are going to change. They're going to break. So your test should be doing something versus just being there. So you hit the lines of code to make your whatever code coverage tool happy.
I think you should always have some rules like if we do a certain type of change, we don't want a unit test to break. Like if we make a text change to a button, we don't want a unit test or any kind of test to pass.
That sounds like chaos testing, Jack.
Well, but like if you're gonna like make a spelling fix, like that's come on.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the little blurby texts, like,
the things that snapshot testing
please enter your credit card here. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Basically just trying to ward people off of snapshot testing. Like, please don't do that. Yeah, well, okay. So Chris, CI/CD. So when do you, just to kind of dig into the whole DevOps thing here. So when do you run these tests and how do you is it a headless thing? Do you run it in CI/CD? All of
that. Very soon we will run them in CI/CD. I'll just say that.
Okay.
But that has a lot more to do with me being the solo guy. And I didn't, the whole trouble with Apple building has to be built on a Mac and the only other option, although
React Native. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the tooling is tough. And although Apple is releasing a cloud, but yeah, I run the tests locally before release or when we're getting quite close, but that's very soon to be added. Now that I have some help from our new developer, but doubled the engineering team size for us. But yeah, I think the typical, the path is simply, I like to throw in the type check. That type check's empty. That's actually my first test, even before unit. And then the unit test, then integration, and then end to end.
When you say type check, you mean like TypeScript checking?
Yes, the TSC.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, we can, it might be overkill. That might have been a bit of overkill from me, but we converted ours into a unit check. Like we get the output from TSC, and if it's 0 lines, the unit test passes. So, although I did that, and then I realized later, I was like, yeah, I could just run the bash command as part of the pipeline. Like,
yeah, I think you could turn that like into a Husky step too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Chris, another article you have that I think is kind of interesting. You make the case for one function per file, which could be potentially controversial. I don't know how the other hosts feel, but why don't you start by making the case for this? Why one function per file?
Yeah. So yeah, I've worked with a lot of code bases. Typically, I think it's a React pattern, or it might be almost like a legacy React pattern, is that you'd have a bunch of exports in one giant file called, like, I think in my blog post, I use like a math as an example, right? So you could imagine add, subtract, divide. Okay, great. But then if you use them, first you import them, and then you get this big import from one file. But the hardest or the most confusing thing for me from that pattern is that when you're in this function file, you're looking all over the place and jumping around. And I don't know. I like, if I open a file, it's just, I can see, hopefully, if the function is well organized, it should all fit right on the screen, right? And then I have it. And the idea there and how it relates to testing is that when you do a unit test, you import this file, and that's basically, other than all your test tooling, that should be the only file from your code base that you're importing. And then you're sure that, at least in a unit sense, this is like what's under test, like this single thing in my code base.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I like it or not in my head.
I'm going to go with dislike. I mean, I can imagine like at least maybe as a compromise, like one exposed function. Like, 'cause I definitely do things where I hide like internal stuff as like if somehow add in the math context were a complex thing to do or something.
Well, but you could argue you could make a function within a function. This is JavaScript. You can throw functions anywhere.
Okay, sure, but don't do that in a React component. I've seen that before. People making like subcomponents inside of the declaration of a function component. That is bad. Like, don't do that. That is, like, you'll actually mess up React if you do that.
But in math, if your function needed to do some like repetitive thing over and over again, you could do that.
In my argument was, if you had this sort of math function, you can organize them by the file name and the subfolder.
So like math/add, math/subtract.
Yep.
Okay.
I suspect I'm in a small minority.
Yeah, it just feels like a lot of files to keep track of instead of just one that has all of your related functions together.
Yeah, I feel like now I'm just bringing up like a bringing up like a code base and looking around because I don't know, like
shred my code bases.
At the same time, like I can see though, like I do, even if I don't totally agree with one function per file, like definitely like it's definitely an anti-pattern to be building these monstrosity files that I think most of us have worked on, right? Like even if like we maybe can't get on board fully with slimming things down to one function, like once your file, like I've worked at places where we had rules that like once you reached a file reached a certain number of lines, it would spit out some sort of warning, right? Like you're over like 300 lines in this file. Like, are you sure you want to keep, are you sure you want to keep going?
The RB Dragons. I just refactored a GraphQL server file that I had. It was 2,400 lines.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Sounds right. I remember working on
I was 100% on
me. You might want to consider this one function per file.
But now I understand like why he says his integration tests are so large. Because if an integration test is defined by a test, because integration tests are a weird definition anyway. But if it's defined by a test that includes more than one file, then like if you have one function per file, like 90% of your tests are going to span across multiple files somehow. Yeah,
it's true.
Very controversial, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. It may have been just my reaction to seeing, I've also worked with some of these giant files and I just said, nope, just keep it simple. One per file. That's my rule. Yeah. We'll see. Maybe we also have to refactor some of our functions.
I will give you that if you hit Command P and so you're now searching around on files in VS Code, different IDEs have different ones, but if you're doing Command P, then and you type in add, right? You'd get, if you have one function per file, you get it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of cool. As long as you don't, don't do the thing where you have like an add directory, like /math/add/index.
No.
Index is implementation and then index.spec or test. Oh God, you kill me. And then you have a billion indexes.
So Chris, when you joined the company that you're working for now, was it completely greenfield where you just got to build this app from scratch and make all of the design decisions, the architecture decisions, what libraries we're using, what stack, or was there something that you inherited that you kind of had to take and build off of?
It was definitely inherited, and it actually was a lot of what Jack just mentioned, infinite index.js files. That's part of why I went to this one file. One function per file pattern. But in the other struggle, at least from a JavaScript or now TypeScript perspective, is that it was a weird mix of I was seeing TypeScript syntax with JS file extensions and everything in between. And actually that's something nice we've achieved very recently is there's no more TypeScript errors in the entire code base. It took a long time, but we finally gotten there and now it's great because you can, for example, like we just upgraded a package, then you just run TSC and you say, okay, they changed, of course you read the documentation, but you find immediately where in the code base that the changes are. And so, these types don't work here. Before when we had 500 TypeScript errors anyway, they were just lost in a sea of like confusion and you don't know where there's like errors hiding. So yeah, it was a big takeover. And of course, there were also no tests written. And I still think tests in general are kind of, I might be biased from my own experience. It was one of the last things that I kind of learned and I'm still learning as a software engineer. But I think it's a lot of, because we all like to, when we test, we'd like to just run the app or click around and use it ourselves, right? That's like, it's kind of your natural way to go. But I really see now the value of having automated tests, and it gives you security or not security, but a better feeling about what you're shipping. So just another layer of
confidence,
peace of mind. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
You should always get down to zero warnings and zero errors for sure, but zero warnings. Because otherwise, it's white noise. And people just ignore it after a while. And then, and you're in hell.
Yeah. Oh, no, nobody's touched that function because if we touch it or change it, you know, nobody knows what happens. Yeah.
That's what
has
test
to be
supposed
cleaned
to
up.
avoid.
So, Chris, do you have any other tips or from being like a solo developer starting on like a big project like this? Do you have like any other thoughts or things people might find interesting from going through that experience?
I think the best thing you can do is just to, I want to say write one function per file, but no, really, it's the best thing you can do is try and be organized or write code that's, you know, thinking about this, like this file length limit. That's almost true, especially when you work alone. You can't really afford to have these big complex functions and components. And you even on a bigger team, you probably shouldn't. So I think my number one advice would be to try and write code that's like small and manage in small manageable parts that work together. Yeah.
I think I can definitely see that, because if I'm left to myself, if I'm coding by myself, I definitely have a different mode, right? Where I'm far more willing to just go, it's the Wild West, right? I have my giant function. I know what it does. It does what it needs to do, right? And I don't think about it too much. Whereas if I'm working on a team, I'll approach it like, well, okay, Paige is going to see this and have to figure out what it's going to do and how that's going to work. So I might think about it a little bit more. So I think I would struggle in that role just because I don't know. My apps would fall apart at scale because I would just be lazy about it.
Yeah. I mean, I had to fight the same thing too, right? But the hope I kept in mind, I was like, yeah, soon there will be someone on the team, you know, this, you know, with the vision that we're growing. I mean, we are growing slowly too, but the vision that more engineers will be writing on this code base soon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, every time I'm asked to evaluate a code base and it's a single coder on it, and it's been there for a year or so, over a year, I'm like, oh,
watch out.
That's going to be there's some weird stuff going on there for sure.
Yeah, single engineer or also like contractor written. That's been the other red flag for me too.
Oh no. Oh yeah.
Just because when someone's not accountable to the team, right? They just somebody just has to see something working to sign off on it. Then things can often get hairy.
Yeah. I would be a strong fan of the single function per file if I was a contractor and getting paid per file.
There you go. Yeah. I'll do it.
Yeah.
Line of code.
At one constant per file.
Awesome. Well, Chris, have we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything we've missed? Like any articles you've covered, any topics that we haven't got into that you wanted to discuss at all?
I think one thing I was going to mention before we got into the whole CI/CD and the function per file discussion, a huge thing that we've learned, or it's quite simple really, is like, because we're talking about all these tests, you have your tests, they pass great. But most often, of course, bugs are either like super weird or user reported that nobody expect or saw. And one of the best kind of patterns that we've done is like, okay, we get a critical bug or either a very weird bug or something. Then you write a test specifically against that bug. Maybe it wasn't in your feature files, wasn't in your specifications, but write a test against that bug, or fix the bug, of course, and then write a test against it to kind of make sure that it doesn't come back, right? That it does. There's no 100% regression.
Agree on that one for sure.
So
yeah,
that's one thing I forgot to mention, but that might even be if you work somewhere and maybe your organization has no tests yet, that may be one of the first places to go or the easiest way to start writing tests.
Yeah.
It's also very satisfying if you can get it to show up as red and then you implement a fix and then feel confident that like get to see it switch over. It's a very satisfying feeling too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hi, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been coaching some people on starting some podcasts and in some cases just taking their career to the next level. You know, whether you're beginner going to intermediate going to advanced, whether you're trying to get noticed in the community or go freelance, I've been helping these folks figure out how to get in front of people, how to build relationships, and how to build their careers and max out and just go to the next level. So if you're interested in talking to me and having me help you go to the next level, go to topenddevs.com/coaching. I will give you a 1-hour free session where we can figure out what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and figure out what the next steps are. And then from there, we can figure out how to get you to the place you want to go. So once again, that's topenddevs.com/coaching.
Cool. Well, it's been awesome chatting with you. I think we can move on to our picks. So it's where we just pick something, movies, TV show, music. We're still waiting for somebody to have a strong musical take. We do a lot of TV shows. But Jack, do you want to kick us off today?
Yeah, sure. Why not? My daughter and I just finished up the UCS Millennium Falcon build, which is it's a Lego build. It's just ginormously huge. It's like I think 7,000 parts and 1,500
Nice.
pages.
Oh my God.
It's epic. Yeah.
How long did that take?
We're kind of old hands at the Lego thing, so it took us 3.5, 4 days.
Wow.
But it was, woo! It was, we basically traded off on it and it was fun, So if you're into that sort of thing, it's a fun build. I will say that if you are into movie speak, it has a lot of what's called greebles, which are just basically little things that you put on something to make it visually interesting. So there's just a lot of stuff on there. Just like it's not actually not functional. It's just kind of stuck on. And it's just a lot of that. Like you build a structural piece and then it's like a bunch of just add a lot of little bits kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
Awesome.
Cool. Paige, what picks do you have?
My pick for this week is going to continue on the kitchen tools train. So this one is a plastic wrap dispenser. So normally when you get plastic wrap, it comes in those cardboard boxes. The little cutter is not very good, if there is a cutter at all, or just rips and tears and stuff. So we bought a bamboo wooden food dispenser. It comes with a really nice little top cutter and it works like a charm. It's really heavy, so you can just pull the wrap. It doesn't slide across the table after you. The cutter works really well. So I would definitely recommend that if you have $20 to spend, get one of these things, and you'll probably never need another one.
I've probably seen one of these behind a sushi bar or something when they're making the rolls.
Could be.
Kind of thing, yeah.
Awesome. My pick this week is going to be a weird one, kind of a very specific one, but I'm going to pick Amazon Go, which I don't know if any of you have went to one of these stores before, but you'd have to be in either Seattle, Chicago, or New York. So that's why it's a very specific pick. But there are these stores by Amazon where their core tech is there's no checkout. You just at the door, you go in, there's these turnstiles and you scan your phone in the Amazon app. So it knows who you are. You grab whatever you're going to buy and then you just leave. And the system there is smart enough. There's cameras. The entire ceiling is covered with these cameras. And you just get a notification on your phone a few minutes after you walk out with just a receipt of what you bought. And I'm picking it just because if you're in the area, it's just fascinating to do because it's just such a weird experience, right? Like you feel very, very strange. Like you feel like you're actually committing a crime when you walk out of the place. And for me too, we went with the whole family. So you go in as a group and I was just amazed at the technology because we had two 11-year-old kids, right? So of course they're just grabbing things off the shelves, putting it on and off, walking around, whatever. And sure enough, we bought 5 or 6 things between the 4 of us and it perfectly knew exactly what we bought, charged us perfectly. And I was just kind of amazed by it. So if you're ever in the area, if you're a listener in one of those 3 areas, it's worth doing once just to experience it.
Is there any security there? Can you just walk out?
You literally walk out. There was not a human employee in the store. There might be somebody in the back or something for all I know, but we did not see a single employee. It's kind of crazy.
Wow, that's trusting.
Awesome. So Chris, what picks do you have?
I guess I'll do 2 books. The first, I guess, is quite relevant. It's we've all read it on the team. It's The Lean Startup by Eric, I think Rice, you pronounce it with his last name. It's quite interesting. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff packed in there. So yep, that's my first. And then I guess, the second is a series of books, the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. I guess it's made a kind of a resurgence recently because I think Apple did a series on it or something. But
Apple did it.
The books are awesome. I recommend to read the books first.
I'm surprised Apple did it because it seems like an unfilmable show, and it kind of was, actually.
Is it science fiction?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I will have to check
much.
this out. Cool. Well, Chris, last question for you. If people want to follow you, what's the best place to do that sort of thing?
I guess the easiest is just my blog. It's chrisfrew.in. And I think from there you can find me anywhere. I am trying to get back to making YouTube videos, but I've been extremely busy with the startup, but I hope this fall. Man.
Yeah.
Feel the pain.
So
cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's a lot of fun to chat.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. It's really fun.
Cool. And until next week, everybody.
See you then.
All right. See you then.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.